Hello everyone, thank you for coming. So my name is Jenny Thomas and I'm from Nutshell Accounts. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about setting your pricing and making yourself more profitable. We've got to that time of year where you may be thinking ahead to the new year, if you can look past Christmas and the holiday season. And if you're anything like me, you're thinking, how am I going to make next year more successful than this year? And one of the first things you think about is obviously your pricing. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So I will be recording this webinar. I will make the recording available to people after the session has ended. This session will only be probably about half an hour maximum. I've kept it short and sweet, but with just a few things in here for you to think about that you can then apply in your business, and feel free to come back to me with any questions about how you might use some of the things that I'm telling you to think about. So let's jump right in. And does any of this sound familiar? Do you find that a lot of your clients expect an immediate answer? They'll call you whatever time of day, they don't book an appointment, they'll just pick up the phone, constantly contact you out of hours, on your day off, even at the weekends. You have no time to onboard any new clients because you know that takes time, but your cash balance isn't as healthy as it might be, and you feel like you need to take on those new clients. And if you have any staff, any employees, some of them are starting to complain that they've got too much to do, which doesn't make sense to you because you're thinking to yourself, well, but I'm not making enough profit. I can't afford to bring anyone else on at the moment. It doesn't make sense. Or maybe you don't even know your profits and you don't have the information available to you to be able to make those decisions. So these are all things that I have felt myself in my own practice. So I set up my practice about 4 years ago now. I actually set it up when I was on maternity leave from my first child. And, at the very beginning, I had no idea how to price my services. And, I'm an accountant, so I tried to do some analysis. I thought about a lot of the things that I'm going to tell you about now. But my gut instinct is always to price lower, because that's the person I am, and I don't always value the services that I put across to people. I've learned to deal with that now, and actually having employees makes that decision an awful lot easier because you always want to be able to pay their salaries. So this is a very familiar situation to me. However, I have managed to pull myself out of this, and using all of the data that can be available to you and changing your mindset around your pricing and thinking about the value that you are bringing to other businesses can make this all feel a lot easier. And it also makes all those sort of conversations, sales conversations and fee renewal conversations a lot easier because you feel like you've got the backup for what you are saying. So, as I say, these are some of the underlying causes for why you might be feeling like this. So there are a few different things. So some of it is actually things like your systems and processes. So moving away from pricing, maybe you need to put more automation into some of your systems and processes. How can you make cost savings and time savings by systemizing some of your processes? Maybe you've got a lack of clarity over your numbers. Maybe you don't have time to do your bookkeeping, for example, and you literally just don't know how much profit you're making each month. And then on the flip side of that, maybe you don't know how much cash you're taking in each month. Have you been chasing up your debtors? Do you know how much money it needs to go out of the bank for your VAT return next quarter, for example? Are you being hit by sudden large bills that you should really know are coming, but because you haven't got the time to look at it, it's damaging your ability to do your business? And then obviously we come to these clauses, and these all lead to the issue that we're going to talk about today, which is underpricing. So this is where a client calls you up, oh, please, could you just do this? No. No is a full sentence. You don't need to explain yourself to them. You can even just say, no, it's not in the contract. Or you say to them, yes, of course I can. That will be this much. Scope creep is a huge issue in service firms. You know, when you're not selling a tangible product and it's a service, you're selling your time, it's so easy for clients to go, can you just do this? Could you just spend, but it won't take very much of your time, only 10 minutes. Well, 10 minutes of your time, if you think about it, should be paid for. You know, if all of your clients came to you and said they just needed an extra 10 minutes of your time, that could probably take up potentially a whole day every month. Well, that's a whole day that you should be charging for. And a large part of it can also come down to just undervaluing your expertise. You have spent a long time training and working towards getting your practice to where it is, right? You should be paid for that. There's this whole thing of, you know, just because you can give an answer quickly doesn't mean that the value of it to somebody else isn't worth a significant amount of money. It is saving them time and money, so they should be paying you for that service. So these are the two ways that people can use to set their pricing. So you could just set an hourly rate. So a lot of people, when they set up a new business, a service business, they'll just work on an hourly rate because that's almost what they're used to. They are used to being an employee or maybe even just working as a contractor. And so they know how much money they want to make per hour. However, how do you set that hourly rate? Do you take your old salary, turn it into an hourly rate and just charge that? Well, no, you should probably charge a bit more than that because you've now got costs of a business to cover. You've also got downtime to consider. You've got admin time. You've got all of that marketing that you do. Your hourly rate will sort of seem quite high to you when you first started doing it if you factor all of those things in. The problem with an hourly rate is it's quite uncertain. Okay, so this is where we come on to the value pricing. So pricing based on an hourly rate has a perception these days. People are definitely moving away from this now because there's a perception that work might be done more slowly because then obviously people are being paid more. On the flip side, you feel like you need to do the work as quickly as possible because you don't want them to have that perception. And then you're cramming everything in and you're maybe not working as efficiently as possible, or maybe not as accurately as possible to provide the best possible work. So then there's no certainty over the price. Okay, so as the person who wants the work done, as your client, you want to have that certainty because you're budgeting. So whilst you might be able to give them an estimate of the hours that it will be taken, it's not certain. So things can overrun. And then nobody really likes then getting an extra invoice at the end, do they? It's like, oh, what, you spent how many hours on that? You will get a lot more pushback and you have to spend a lot of your time justifying why you spent that much time on a task. And bearing in mind, a lot of the time, your clients will not understand the expertise and the time taken to unpick some of the stuff that you are doing. Feeling like you're on the clock as well, just in general, it just doesn't feel good. I would generally say, unless it's for a specific type of project, I would usually move away from an hourly rate. Doesn't mean, though, that we shouldn't use hourly rate and time as a tool to work out what your fixed prices should be, but more on that in a minute. So this is where we come on to value-based pricing. So this is something where you are selling your value. It shouldn't matter how much time a piece of work takes you. It should be based on the value that that piece of work is bringing to your client. So, you know, you, as a very experienced individual, are able to pull together something, or maybe even you already had it pulled together, in 10 minutes. However, the reason you can do it in 10 minutes is you did the learning, you did the qualifications, you have the experience, you've done it many times before. And because of all of those things, you are able to do it in 10 minutes. If your clients tried to do that, first of all, they'd probably get it wrong because they would use Mr. Google, and they wouldn't be able to necessarily apply all of the information that's on Mr. Google. Secondly, it would take them a few hours to go and look everything up and sort everything out. Thirdly, they may not be able to apply it correctly. You would therefore save them, in that 10 minutes of work that you have done, you have saved them hours of work, you've given them a more accurate solution, and you've helped them apply it. That saved them time and money. You may even have in the accounting profession, there are times where, I'm able to apply something that just means that it saves them thousands of pounds in tax, purely because I know in my head, I know all of the reliefs and things that they can claim. That's just an example. You going onto Google and trying to find it all out might mean that you apply the wrong things, and actually then you end up with HMRC tax penalties on the flip side. So the thing to remember is the client is paying for the years of learning and experience that you have accumulated to be able to provide the advice. They're not paying you for the 10 minutes of your time, okay? So you're selling the value, you're not selling your time. The key point here is as well, it provides a fixed price for both sides. So you know how much money is going to be coming in and when, and your client knows how much money is going to go out and when. That makes their budgeting and cash flow much easier to manage. And that's not to say there's not scope to increase for any additional services. If they come back to you and say, oh, could you just do this as well? Remember that little bit about scope creep at the beginning? You say either no or yes, that will be an additional X amount, and move on. And you'll find you get less pushback on this over time. So the more you just say, no, that's my price, it's a fixed price, the less pushback you get. The more confident you are with it, the less pushback you will get over time. So that's all well and good, but how do you actually set your price? You want to set a fixed price based on your value. How long is a piece of string? It's very difficult to start pulling all of that together. And to be honest, it will evolve over time, okay? But there are a few different things that you can look at to try and work out how to set the prices to begin with, before you tweak them as things move on. So the first thing to think about is, what value does this piece of work provide to your clients? Okay, is it going to save them a lot of time? Is it going to generate them some revenue? Are you going to do some marketing work for them? Are you expecting it maybe to bring in an extra £1 million of revenue over the next year? Okay, well, then you need to set your price fairly high for that. Think about the return they're going to get on the investment in you. Is it going to prevent them from future litigation? That's going to save them a significant amount of money. And all of these things, your price is going to be a fraction of that money or time that they are saving, okay? And remember that for them, time has a cost as well. Much like for you, time has a cost. It's time that they can't spend servicing their own business. So that's one thing to think about. And you need to write all of that down and think about it and look at the numbers. And then on the other side of it, you need to think about your own firm. So this is where you need to think about a number of different things. So yes, this is where, as I say, you don't go down hourly pricing, but you should think about how long a task is going to take you, because that is going to inform what that fixed price should be. And as a rule of thumb, you should think about how long the task is going to take you, and then add an extra 10% at least contingency, because these things always end up running on. As long as everyone is clear about that up front, that's fine. You then need to think about whether in the future, even if now you're not going to outsource it to a more junior member of staff, if you want to be able to do that in the future, you need to think about how long it will take a junior member of staff to do that. How much will that cost you to pay that junior member of staff? And how much margin do you want to make on top of that? Okay. And that will start to give you an idea then of how much you should be charging for it. And it's actually, I find it easier to think in this way, because once you've got those staff members who need to be paid and you want to be able to pay them a good salary, you suddenly start selling your value to your clients even better, okay? Because you know you have to at least cover their costs. And you don't just want to cover their costs, you want to be able to take some of that margin for yourself and the business to cover the fixed costs as well, okay? And then the final thing to think about is, you know, what do you want your hourly rate to be? You know, it's not something that's necessarily going to be used to set your pricing. It might be, you know, an aspiration. But if you think about that and then you apply that to how long you think the task is going to take you, and it comes out to a figure, and then you look at that alongside how much value you're going to bring to your client, do the two look reasonable next to each other? Okay. This is why data is so important. You need to be able to get this data out, and you need to be able to pull all of this together and compare it to then come to your figures. And then this is another point, and this sort of, this should be your lowest price point, okay? In fact, don't price yourself at this point, but you need to know your break even, okay? This is where you're not going to make any money on the project. And unless you're doing the project in order to get more clients in potentially in the future, maybe you're going to do it for referrals or for reviews or something like that. Don't price yourself at this point. Make sure you've priced yourself above this point, okay? So what you need to think about is, what are all your fixed costs? Do you manage your bookkeeping, your accounts on a monthly basis? If you do, which you should do, you know, I know I'm an accountant, I'm biased, but please do this. It means you know how much cost you have to be able to pay, like to cover every single month. You should have a sort of a regular monthly fixed cost amount for things like your rent and rates, subscriptions, and in many cases, salaries as well. So if you've got people on monthly salaries, that becomes a fixed cost. So this is the amount you need to be able to cover. So say you have £10,000 going out of the bank every single month for all of your costs, okay? You need to make £10,000 of revenue to cover those costs, okay? So you could then just take that £10,000, work out how many hours in the month you and or your staff are able to work, and then divide that to get your hourly rate. And then double it, at least, to be able to give you a profit at the end of it. Yeah. So whilst I haven't told you the exact method of deciding your pricing, those are the things you need to think about. And it really is making this huge shift towards value pricing rather than hourly pricing, okay? My key takeaway from this is the hourly, like the time spent on a task should inform the price, the set price that you give, okay? However, you should also look at the value that you are giving, okay? Just because it's not taking you very long to do does not mean that you shouldn't be charging for your expertise. So one thing though, to finish up though, I tend to think a very clear pricing structure is very important. So I actually have, I use pricing software, and I have all of my services and they are set prices, okay? They might be calculated based on sort of number of transactions or revenue and things, because I'm an accountant. There are different parameters in there. But some of my advisory services are set prices that I charge every single client the same. And it's really important. And I find I get far less pushback now than I ever used to, because it's all very clear that I do it in front of them and I show them the software, and it calculates it right in front of them after we put in everything that they need for their services. Okay. And the key things are, I have considered the pricing of all of those services very carefully. I'm really consistent with all of my clients. So before I implemented this, I was sometimes feeling like I was charging one client far more whilst charging another more legacy client far less. Okay, but I was spending more time on the person that I was charging less. But it's not fair. And as a client, you start to get that perception, don't you? You want to feel like all clients are being treated equally. I also find that, you know, in my proposals, every service is broken down and it's all explained in detail. So this stops scope creep, okay? Because it means every single thing is in that initial proposal in the engagement letter. It means that prospects feel really comfortable from the start. They've got a really clear monthly price that has everything that they want in it. And everyone is clear on the scope. And when they come to you and say, actually, could you just add this in? Like, yes, of course. I'll just add that to the proposal, send it across to them. They agree it and come back. And I get a lot less pushback because of this. So something to think about. Make sure you're communicating the value that you are bringing to people. So in my service schedules that I have in there, it tells people exactly what the processes are that we have in our practice. It tells them what they can expect from us as a level of service. And, you know, it makes them feel comfortable. And what next? So once you've set your prices, you need to keep reviewing them, okay? So review them over time. You need to keep gradually increasing them over time as well. You know, probably at least in line with inflation, if not more, okay? As you bring in more staff members, as you keep growing, you need to review whether your prices need to increase to reflect any of this. Keep an eye on that break-even point. Make sure you're staying well above that break-even point by constantly reviewing. So one exercise that I found very, very helpful, and I've done this a few times in my own practice now, is this is where I say that the hourly work needs to inform the price. Okay, so I set out all of my clients and I work out how much time we spend on each client. And I speak with my team members and I work out how much we have all spent on that client in the last month or 2 months. And then you look at their fees and you work out what their effective hourly rate is. Okay, and you can look down that and you can see any anomalies. Okay, where you've got anyone who maybe you're even overcharging. There are occasions where I have to go back to clients and tell them, actually, you're not utilizing this service anymore. And we take it out. Or you will have some where, you know, they have grown themselves. Okay. And that means that they are taking more and more of your time. There's been a little bit of scope creep, not necessarily anyone's fault. It's just that the business has grown. And so there is more of all of the normal work. That business needs to be repriced. Okay. So you have a review session with them. You should have, you know, if you've got sort of regular monthly fee clients, you should be reviewing at least on a quarterly basis to make sure that that pricing is still correct, because businesses change so quickly. And that's it from me. So I did keep it short and sweet. It's less than half an hour. I hope there was some useful things in there. And do feel free to reach out to me. I will be doing a series of webinars over the next few months on various different topics that might be helpful for you. If you've got any ideas of things that you'd like me to talk about or any examples you'd like me to walk through with you, do drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. So my name's Jenny. I'm from Nutshell Accounts. We're a chartered accountancy practice, and we work with largely service-based small businesses, small to medium businesses. And I'd love to hear from any of you. Thank you very much.